The sun was bleeding into the western horizon, painting the sky in amber and ash. The small frontier town of Judgment Wells sat silent, its main street carved with dust and regret. The air was thick, the kind that carried whispers instead of wind. And beneath the creaking sign of the old marshal's office, 4 women stood on the porch, ropes tied cruelly around their necks. The townsfolk watched from the distance, torn between fear and guilt. The women were accused of witchcraft, murder, and conspiracy, though none could say what crime they had truly committed. They had been the ranch hands' healers, the ones who spoke to the wind, the ones who knew when the cattle would die before it happened. Their only sin was knowing too much. Among them was Clara Hale, the eldest, her face steady even as the noose brushed her cheek. She had discovered something she shouldn't have, secret buried deep beneath the desert soil. For weeks, the town's wells had gone dry. The cattle had died, and men had vanished into the night. Clara had tracked the cause not to the storms or bad luck, but to a hidden deal between the sheriff and the Northern Pacific Railroad, a deal that would flood the valley, drown the ranches, and leave the townsfolk destitute. When she tried to speak, they called her a liar. When she refused to stop, they called her a witch. The sheriff, red-eyed and sweating, pulled the lever that dropped the platform. Gasps ripped through the street, but the ropes went taut without a sound. For a breathless moment, it seemed justice had fallen silent. Then came the thunder of hooves. A lone rider broke through the dust like a ghost, his coat long, his hat shadowing eyes that burned with purpose. The townsfolk scattered as the rider. Jonas Creed reined his horse before the gallows. 2 gleaming blades crossed his back, but it was the badge, glinting beneath his coat, that caught. The dying light, an old marshal's star, tarnished but real. In one motion he drew his revolver, fired, and the ropes split, one by one. The women collapsed to the porch, coughing life back into their lungs as the sheriff stumbled back in disbelief. Jonas dismounted, his boots hitting the dust like thunder. "That's enough hangings for one day," he said, his voice steady as stone. He helped Clara to her feet, his gaze searching hers. "You found something you shouldn't have, didn't you?" She nodded weakly, clutching the frayed rope that had nearly ended her life. "They're selling the valley," she whispered. "The railroad's paying the sheriff to drive us out." Jonas turned to the crowd. "You all knew, didn't you? You just didn't want to be next." Silence fell heavy as judgment. The sheriff reached for his rifle, but Jonas was faster. One shot split the rifle clean from his hand. "You hang another soul in this town," Jonas said, "and I'll make sure it's the last rope you ever tie." As the night settled, Jonas led the women to his ranch beyond the canyon, a lonely stretch of land surrounded by whispering grass and forgotten graves. There, under the open sky, Clara told him everything: the forged deeds, the buried gold, the plans to drown every rancher who stood in the way of progress. Jonas listened, jaw tight. He had once worn the marshal's badge for truth. Now he'd wear it again for vengeance. But the sheriff wasn't done. That night, a dozen men rode for Jonas's ranch, torches in hand, determined to burn the secret with its keepers. The sound of hoofbeats rolled like thunder across the plains, and Clara's eyes widened. "They're coming," she said. Jonas loaded his rifle, the firelight glinting off the barrel. "Then let them come," he muttered. "Let's see if the devil himself can ride through my land." The wind rose, carrying the scent of smoke and fear. The fight for Judgment Wells was about to begin. Dawn broke red over the canyon, the light spilling like blood over the dry earth. Smoke drifted through the valley, and the air was alive with the echo of gunfire. Jonas Creed stood on the ridge, his long coat torn, rifle in hand, his face marked with dust and resolve. The sheriff's men had come at midnight, thinking they could burn him out before the sun rose. They didn't count on a man who'd once hunted outlaws across 5 states, or on 4 women who refused to die twice. Clara and the others fought beside him, reloading bullets, dousing flames, using every trick they'd learned from years of surviving in a land that took everything but pride. The sheriff's men came in waves, their torches burning bright against the night, but the ranch stood tall. Each shot Jonas fired was precise, deliberate. He wasn't killing to avenge, but to protect. He had seen enough death for one lifetime. By sunrise, only the sheriff remained, wounded and crawling through the dirt toward his fallen horse. Jonas walked up slowly, boots crunching over dry grass. "You could have sold your soul quietly," Jonas said, voice low. "But you had to hang good people to hide your lies." The sheriff spat dust. "You don't understand, Creed. Progress is coming. You can't stop it. Jonas knelt beside him, eyes cold as the dawn. Progress doesn't hang people for knowing the truth. He tossed the sheriff a canteen. You tell the railroad men the deal's off. Judgment Wells stays free. If they don't like it, they can try coming through me. When the sheriff rode away, broken and beaten, the valley was silent except for the whisper of wind through the sagebrush. The women stood together, their faces lit by the pale morning sun. Clara turned to Jonas. "Why'd you save us?" she asked softly. Jonas looked out toward the horizon, where the land stretched endless and empty. "Because once someone saved me," he said, "and I never paid it forward." In the weeks that followed, Judgment Wells began to heal. The townsfolk returned to rebuild, ashamed but determined. The railroad men vanished, their plans buried with their greed. Jonas never asked for thanks. He worked the ranch quietly, fixing fences, mending roofs, teaching Clara's youngest sister to ride. At night, under the stars, they'd gather by the fire, telling stories of what happened, the night the noose failed, and justice came on horseback. As the story spread, travelers passing through would stop and ask, "Is it true what they say, that a rancher saved 4 women from the hangman's rope?" Clara would smile faintly. "No," she'd say. "He saved a whole town." And somewhere, beyond the flickering firelight, Jonas Creed would tip his hat, mount his horse, and ride off toward the horizon, another mystery lost to the desert, another legend born.